Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon, a workforce development consultant with the Kent ISD in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm so delighted to have Jody Poole with us today. She's the VP of Design at Custer Inc. Interior Design. So welcome, Jody.
Hi, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So here at Career Chats, Jody, we love to take you back to where some of the high school students are at and hear about what you were thinking. So when you were 15 or 16, did you think you grew up to be VP of Design?
Yeah, no way, not at all. I thought I was going to be a fine artist doing paintings and drawings and getting paid for it.
Paintings and drawings. So you've always been an artist, is what I'm hearing.
That's true, yes.
Yes. And I love that you wanted to. What changed? Like, what made you step out of that as the dream job?
Well, gosh, when I started going to college, I ended up going after community college to Kendall, which is a private art school here in Grand Rapids, and started learning about how, what you choose to do in your career path is actually ends up being your job. And finally putting two and two together that like just because I love something doesn't necessarily mean that I can make a lucrative career out of it. And certain things like being an artist and what were some of the other things I majored in, like art history, those have a very narrow career path to them. So finding something that I was still passionate about, that I could feel fulfilled in art, in that design sense, but also kind of make money still. That was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely going to talk more about that. So for young people that might be artists or they're creatives in high school, take us back to that high school age. Were you involved in obviously your art classes? Were you doing anything extracurricular around your art? How much of that was a part of your life?
Well, I grew up in the country and on the east side of the state, maybe like 20 minutes past Flint. I was always art inclined, but we didn't have even a really robust art program. And it wasn't until I started researching some different classes at different universities that I understood like how much more there was for me to see. And now flashing forward as a business professional, I really want to outreach to high school students that might not know that there is a career path in design and how the two can kind of be synonymous. Yeah, I don't I think I was a cheerleader. I wasn't involved in a ton of sports, but it was mostly like art and books, which I still read a lot of books. So.
Yeah, because I think some of this gifting, shows up early. So for young people to understand that maybe that if they have that natural ability around art, that it's a special thing. Not everybody has it, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so you are going through high school, and did you know you wanted to go to college? Was that something that you've been encouraged to do? And especially around art, what were people around you saying about that major?
That you won't make any money in that, that there's no jobs in that. And it isn't that there were no jobs, it was just that the people that I was talking to had a very narrow field of vision for what you could do. So when I was in high school, again, in the country, it was like the main careers, doctor, lawyer, veterinarian. I think it's so great that there's like career fairs and different professionals that are outreaching to kind of to spread the joy of what more there is out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I asked you that question because I know a lot of creatives do get that kind of response that you're not going to make any money and blah
Hmm.
blah blah. So how did you deal with that kind of feedback? Did that keep you like, hey, this is what I want to do, or do you remember the kind of the angst of making those decisions early on with college?
Yeah. I thankfully I spent a year in community college figuring it out. Honestly, had I to do over again, I would have spent a little bit more time considering more or using the resources available to me in the counselor's office instead of just trying to go it alone and figure it out on my own. Now with more internet resources, I think if you're so inclined, you can find them yourself. But I forget what the question was, if I'm being honest.
No, you're okay. Um, just like how you dealt with
Oh, right.
like
Right,
that
right,
angst
right.
of making a decision, like, is this what I want to do? Because you're getting this kind of negative talk.
Yeah, well, I ended up changing my major a bunch of times. So, like I said, I started with fine arts, drawing and painting. And then as I talked to the professors, they're like, oh, well, if you want kind of more of like a boots on the ground, something that has a little bit more practicality to it, you could try, you could be an art school teacher yourself. So I tried that program for a while. But as I was kind of getting my feet wet and experimenting with different things and seeing what felt and fit right, um, that's extra money in classes that I was taking, and I'll be honest, I'm still paying for my student loans now, so um, that's kind of just part of life, and that's another thing I wish I would have learned more about was the different financial, aid that was available, and I did not take advantage of that either.
Yeah, so for young people that are watching this, hear those two pieces of wisdom that she would have tapped into some of her guidance counselors or school counselor resources. Obviously, we have the internet today, but then also to really understand what the financial commitments are. So that's great wisdom right off the top for us, Jody, for sure. So you're exploring that freshman year, and then when did you know that this was time to move to an art school?
I always knew that I wanted to go to an art school. For some reason, I just really knew that I would thrive there. I again wish I would have listened to my parents and stayed in community college for a little while longer and gotten through the basics and then figured it out. But I think I always knew that I wanted to go to an art school.
Yeah. So when you went in, did you start with the fine art, or had you already realized that maybe interior design was the more practical, make sure you get a job kind of major?
I started out in fine arts, I think probably primarily because that was a lot of what the high school I was going to offered was the drawing and some light modeling and things like that. So that was mainly what my portfolio was made of. So when I went and I took the portfolio interview, they're like, "Well, let's see your portfolio." We didn't even honestly, gosh, I'm gonna sound so old. We didn't even have computer technology at that time to make digital graphics or anything that would have applied at that time. So it made sense for me to continue on that path and pursue the fine arts.
So what do you remember about the thought process when you were going through that to change your major then at Kendall?
Well, I didn't end up finding interior design until I met my future husband, who is a carpenter. And interior design, I think now is a little bit more marketable and present in the public eye just because of HGTV and people are more aware of the nuance of it and how it applies to people's daily lives. But um, it was actually my husband who had said, "Have you ever considered interior design? It's a program that Kendall offers. You can still be creative, and then it seems like there's some jobs out there that might be in the same vein." So when I sat down and talked to the counselor about that, they were like, "Oh yeah, you have a lot of credits that cross over. So why don't you give it a try?" And I really liked it a lot, and apparently I liked it enough to continue to stay with it because that was the one thing that finally stuck for me. I found it. It took a while.
Yeah, and that's part of the journey sometimes. And like you say, I love being able to give some insights for young people that they maybe don't have to change so much, with some intervention, they can maybe figure it out a little earlier, but that's your journey. And
Yeah.
so you're getting this degree in interior design. And why don't you help us understand what basic interior design is? Obviously, we know HGTV, but I know there's a lot more to it that young people don't know about. So why don't you help us understand the kind of scope of what interior design can actually bring a person?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's primarily two types of interior design, and they do cross over, but they each have their own specialties that you can focus on. One is residential, and that's a lot of what you're going to see on HGTV with Chip and Joanna and all these people that are flipping houses. Um, that is, the really kind of when you're doing residential, it's mainly people's homes. When you're doing commercial designs, it's mainly people's offices and public spaces. So corporate offices, healthcare, educational settings, any place where there's like furniture and finishes, somebody has to do that and make those decisions. And we're hoping that the people that make those decisions are well versed or have a good eye for it. And I think that sometimes when you experience a space or you walk into something, you be like, oh, this person knew what they were doing. This feels really good. Or I feel really cozy. Or this feels like my house. Or I want to stay here. Or the adverse of that would be like, there's something about this space that I really don't like. Like maybe it's the lighting or, you know, the way that the fabric feels on my skin. All of those kind of small things somebody has thought about. I will take it a step further and say, in the state of Michigan, you don't necessarily have to be a certified interior designer, but there is another step further that you can take in your professional career once you graduate from college. Some states require it to be able to practice as an interior designer. Other states, if they have passed that Title Act, you cannot call yourself an interior designer if you don't have a certification. So what that means is after you graduate college from an accredited school, you work a certain amount of professional hours and you track it. And there's all sorts of guidelines and part of the application process. Once you've met the certain criteria, you can then sit for the test. And there's 3 sections, a professional portion, a fundamentals portion, and then what they refer to as the practicum. And that is you actually get in there, you're doing space planning, you're doing lighting calculations. A large part of interior design is, and what people I think don't totally understand, is there's a huge aspect of the public health, safety, and well-being. There's a lot to do with building codes and occupancy types and making sure that you're not putting too much furniture and people in a space that couldn't evacuate the building safely. So that's a larger part of it that I think people don't always see. And that's something that is really downplayed in some of the television that's out there.
Yeah, because that's what I wanted to follow up. Obviously, there's some myths or misinformation going on, and I love that you've already spelled out some of that public health, safety, well-being stuff. What other things have you come across as you talk about, you know, when you mentioned that you're an interior design, that people are like, oh, and then you're like, that's just really not how it is. What would you like to set straight today?
Yeah. You cannot, in fact, totally revamp a kitchen or a bathroom for under $10,000 over a weekend, unless you have a huge team of people, but your budget is always going to be a restriction. So that's probably the timeline and the budget are the 2 main kind of like backlash things that we've got from all these like fast flip TV shows. People expect to not have to pay that much for certain things. They're like, oh, I saw this on TV and they did it for like $5,000 and the kitchen was half the size. Well, what you're not seeing is that, you know, it's stuck on there with Elmer's glue, like, you know, somebody's behind the fridge holding it up or something like that. So budget and timeline are always restrictions that you're going to have to deal with. And that's just part of life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take us back one step because young people always like to know. So you graduate from college. How did you get that first job? Like, how did you make that transition as a student into the first job? Was it an easy road or linear?
Yeah, no, this is my favorite story to share with students. I got an internship when I was in my senior year at Kendall in the interior design program at Custer, and I literally have never left Custer. So I started as an intern, then I worked up through the interior design department and then senior designer, and then I hit that period of unrest. I'm just like, I feel like there's something else that I could be doing or that I want to do. And I actually proposed an idea to the CEO of a customs division, and they let me spin off and start that, but it was still a division of Custer. And then that was acquired by a design firm in New York, and I interviewed for the VP position to come back to Custer proper, and I got that role, and I've been back here for the last 2.5 years. So it's been 14 years for me that I've been at Custer.
So internships are important, is what I'm hearing. They can lead to
They
full-time
are,
jobs.
they are, and they're actually required as a part of the schooling. It's just kind of to get your feet wet. Best case scenario, when you intern, you love where you're at and they want to hire you. But if not, all experience is good experience. So
Yeah, I think that's important to hear young people that if your school doesn't make that part of your program, for you to get that on your resume and for that experience. So yeah, thanks for that, for Jody. So I guess I really want them to understand what your job is about because you're on the commercial side of interior design. And again, a lot of young people don't understand the differences. They see what they see on TV with residential, but my goodness, everything that every restaurant we go to, every, like you say, our school, it's all been by an interior designer. So help us understand kind of what your job maybe in the early days and then what it's evolved to.
Yeah. Well, the commercial aspect of things is a little bit different. The budgets are usually bigger, but sometimes there's more restrictions on it. Certainly there's different types of things we have to consider when it comes to workplace, the type of work that's happening, the type of collaboration that they do. And that I think is really fun for me. And I love coming back to a job and being like, our work is so much more streamlined, or we've got so much better, workflow like this. Like there's a lot we can do for process. And inspiration and things like that that are just a really exciting part of the job. But so a normal job would come in, and let's just say I'm not in the VP position right now. I'm an interior designer on the team. A project comes in, I'd meet with my salesperson. And we'd go and we'd talk to the client, find out their needs. What's the new project? You've got a new golf bar, or you want to move offices, or you're renovating or buying a new building. We figure out the scope and scale of what they need. And sometimes it's just like, I just need a new conference table and chairs. Very small project, and there's not much to it. But other times you'll walk in and be like, well, have you considered, maybe putting some technology and some acoustic solutions in here for your video technology? Or, have you considered what some new lighting might do for the way that you view your projects on this table? So being really thoughtful and thinking very macro about what's happening in the space and the users in it. And it could just be a conference room, and it could be a full floor space where you're thinking like, where are these people going to eat their lunch, and what percentage of them eat at their desk versus how many seats we're going to have to try to account for in the cafe. If it's mostly open office, are there enough places for people to dip out and take private phone calls if they need to, get away from their desk because they don't want their coworkers to overhear or be disruptive? There's a lot to think about. And it's just kind of certain things that you pick up working with senior designers or working from job to job. And it is a continuing process of learning. When we bring in new designers, we embed them right in the team, and they hear so much just by being next to, adjacent, and within. It's really invaluable, which is another reason why mentorship and internships are really important. My job is a little bit
Yeah,
different now.
hearing that you really are consulting, and again, your client may not even think about lighting or the technology. So you really are thinking how that space is going to be used and really coaching them along and gleaning information so that you can help put together a
Yeah,
proposal.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
and
great.
it's all programming,
Yeah, it's all program.
fact finding questions, asking the right questions, and helping put the pieces together.
So do other people on the teams that focus like on the fabrics versus like the lighting, like do you get that into that kind of specificity, or are you kind of covering it all?
It depends on what the project requires, and sometimes there's varying levels. For instance, say we're in this conference room and they're like, it's like an echo chamber in here, and we have video conferencing in here, and we need to be able to hear better. We can come in and we can like say, oh, well, it's all glass and concrete. Let's apply some absorbent finishes like soft seating or carpets. Or if it's a really large room and we need to take it further, like we can do something decorative on the ceiling or on the walls. Or if it's really critical, we can bring in a specialist in that area. So an acoustician, somebody that's going to come in and test the levels and be like, okay, well, for this type of setting, you need, whatever it is. They would make recommendations from there. So it depends on the level of the needs. And the same thing goes with lighting. If it's, some ambient lighting, some task lighting, totally no problem. We can cover that. If it's something that's like a lab setting where it's really focused work, or something that requires above and beyond a standard need, we would bring in a consultant or a specialty person.
Was it acoustician? Well, I just learned a new job
Oh,
title.
I know it's a weird one to have to say, an acoustician.
I will be
Yeah.
looking that up. I'll be doing some career research after this about that, everybody.
And I usually tell young designers too, like, there's no reason why you have to be an expert in everything. It's important to know what is now within your purview. Like, I know how to calculate foot candles and lumens, but I don't do it every day. And I have lighting partners. So I'd be like, this is the type of lighting that I want. I want it to look like this and do this. Can you help me find something that'll fit the need in the space? So at least being enough to be dangerous knowledge-wise is important.
Yeah, for sure. How can people understand what kind of technology you use as an interior designer?
Well, they're all computer based. Um, we use a software. So I'm a dealership designer. I work in a furniture dealership and we have an interior design team. We specify a lot of furniture, and the furniture program that we use primarily is called CET. It's made by a company called Configura. And what it does is it designs in 2D, so flat form. You have like AutoCAD files, and then we can populate on top of it. And while it builds in 2D, it's also doing the same thing in 3D, and it's building a specification on the back end. So it's a pretty powerful program. Sometimes when we work with architects, they'll be using Revit files, and we can kind of, condense and transfer files back and forth and just, file share. When I do customs work, which we still do that as well, I'll use SketchUp, which is a modeling software. It's kind of a free form platform that you can make it do like whatever you want. AutoCAD, SketchUp, CET. We use some of the Adobe programs like Photoshop and Illustrator. And there's a range of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. And my question would be then, if you have a high school student who's watching this thinking, that could be a really good job for me. Do you recommend them doing certain things in high school to be gaining some experience for a portfolio or resume? Like, do they have versions of SketchUp that they can start playing around with, or even, Revit
Yeah.
student
Yeah.
versions kind of thing?
There is a free version of SketchUp that's out there, which is just really fun to play around with and honestly, there's still times when I will go out to YouTube and be like, how do I XYZ in SketchUp? And somebody out there has done it and created a video for it, which is amazing. So that's a pretty easy program to pick up and just do for modeling. Even if you're going to like redo your personal kitchen or something, it's just fun to play around in. I think some of the other programs, I don't think that they offer free versions. Possibly they do, but they're pretty pared back. As I understand it, a lot of high schools are starting to become more hip to some of the design software, but I don't yet know what they offer. And it sounds like there's many more classes that are offered now than they were when I was a student.
Yeah, well, that's good. Just for young people, if they can check that out. We'd love to know what your favorite part of your job is then as VP of design, and kind of your least favorite.
Hmm. Well, let's see. I'm gonna cheat and do a two-parter because as an interior designer, I would say one of my favorite parts of the job is creating custom or specialized pieces that you can't find anyplace else that are made specifically for them. And that's what I did when I was in the customs team as well. People get so excited to be able to be a part of the design process and make it exactly how it's going to be working for them. My favorite part of being the VP, however, is getting to do community engagement like this. I love young students, love speaking to young people and prospective designers so much. Just they light up, I light up. It's so much fun. And then being a voice for my team, and just being able to lead and be strategic. One of the things that I think that I'm very strong at is future thinking. So like, what can we do now to plan for the future? Or how can we, like, what are some different vertical markets? What can we do that we're missing out on? Or what are people asking for? And how can we, respond to that? I think that's really fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think some people don't think of future thinking as a special skill set. So young people, if you're listening, maybe you
Mhm.
can identify that with yourself. What's one
It
of the
really.
challenges then, both as an interior designer and as a VP?
What is the challenge? Well, Sometimes it can be tricky to communicate to people that don't think in the same way as you. So being patient and developing the vocabulary to like slow down and be able to communicate what you're thinking and the design that you're trying to get across, and then also articulate the how and the why of it, because anybody can make something look nice, hopefully. But it takes somebody really educated and thoughtful to be able to explain why they think this is going to help them work like better, or why is it worth their money, or what makes this space superior to something else that I could, do anything else. So that's challenging. And then as the VP of design, I would say the most challenging aspect for me is the people part of it. And I was actually explaining this to my 15-year-old son literally last night. I'm like, sometimes there's just difficult people, and learning how to be tactful and handle things that come up with grace and patience is just, it takes a long time to learn. And I've learned that everybody likes to, based on their past experience, has a different way that they like to be engaged with, a different way that they like to be recognized, different ways that they like to receive their constructive criticism. So kind of learning that about each person it can be challenging, and it can be hard to keep straight, especially as the team grows. So that's something that I'm constantly working on.
Yeah, so that interpersonal, like kind of managing people, really understanding how to get the best out of them and keep them motivated and happy. Yeah, that's a lot for a true artist, right? You didn't go to school to be a business manager, or anything.
I want to be like, enough people stuff. I just want to go design a space and be quiet over in this corner for a little bit.
Exactly, exactly. We have about 2 minutes left, so 2 quick questions as we finish up. I'd love you to describe one of your favorite projects that you've worked on, and then give that kind of final word of wisdom in this last minute and a half. I know to ask.
Oh my goodness. One of my favorite projects was actually probably one of the very first ones that I did, where the client, they trusted me to do it, and we had really good synergy, and when we sat down, we just were spinning ideas off each other, and they just trusted me to do it. And there were certain times they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm not really feeling that. Let's try something else." And we'd be like, "Yeah, let's riff off that and see what else we can do." And they got into the space and they loved it, and it worked really well for them, and that was just really satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to be proud of.
That's great. And then as a role model of a creator to other young creatives, what kind of final word of wisdom for you?
Patience is a virtue. It really takes time to get where you want to be, and sometimes you just have to put in the hard work and do stuff that may not necessarily seem like it's going to get you where you need to be. But as I said before, all experience is good experience. You really can't rush it. Life is going to happen at the speed it happens. But also not being afraid to kind of speak up and say like what you're hoping for, because people can't really read your mind either. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Jody. You've been an amazing mentor and gave some great insights for young people who might consider this, and for the school counselors. So thanks for being here today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I had a really nice time.
Good.